Tonight, city street horror. One man arrested after a string of violent and random stabbing attacks across Melbourne. Also tonight, heavy rains lash Victoria as the Weather Bureau warns of more thunderstorms to come. A mid-air fright for passengers after a part of a Boeing plane falls out. And playing for patience, the Victorian health workers behind the orchestra that's healing with harmony. Good evening, Iskhander Razak with ABC News. It's been a frightening night in Melbourne after a string of stabbings in the CBD and nearby neighbourhoods. Police say in 3 hours, 5 people were stabbed in 4 separate and what appear to be random attacks. All of the victims had to be hospitalised, one woman in a critical condition. The 31-year-old Melton man has been arrested and charged with 15 offences. Courtney Withers has the story.
A normal Saturday night turns into a random stabbing spree across Melbourne. In one incident, security footage captures the suspect in a green hoodie approaching a male bystander before stabbing him in the leg.
It's pretty terrifying. To think that something like a random attack like that as well, so close to home.
When I arrived this morning to open up, there was all this blood on the pavement.
Victoria Police labelling the events as extremely concerning.
On each occasion, the victims were minding their own business. They wouldn't have even known that they were about to be attacked.
Police say a 31-year-old Melton man allegedly stabbed 5 people in 4 separate locations across Melbourne, all within 3 hours of each other. One of the victims, a 31-year-old woman, sustained life-threatening injuries. She's in a serious but stable condition in hospital. The others suffered knife injuries to their legs and torsos. The attacker was finally caught by police in South Yarra just after 1 o'clock this morning. He was found with a bag of sharp weapons.
1:30 last night, I was woken up by a loud screaming noise from a male voice. Someone was screaming, "Stand still, put your hands by your side."
Police say it was concerning that the man used public transport to get to each location, but onboard CCTV was used to locate him. And although terrorism has been ruled out, his motive for the alleged offending is still unknown.
Our brothers with the PSOs as well, without the support that we had from them riding the train network, I guess this could potentially be resulting in me appealing for a manhunt.
The 31-year-old man was charged this afternoon with 14 separate assault-related charges and 1 charge of possessing a controlled weapon. He's been remanded in custody and will face court tomorrow. Meanwhile, in Melbourne's outer north, a man was shot after allegedly attempting to break into a Donnybrook house with 2 or 3 other offenders earlier this morning. He was found dead in the laneway, and another man presented to Epping Hospital with gunshot wounds. A night of crime that's left many shaken. Courtney Withers, ABC News, Melbourne.
Victoria is being drenched by a significant rain band making its way east across the state, but the worst may be yet to come. A number of severe weather warnings are in place for flash flooding and for damaging thunderstorms, with authorities predicting up to 200 millimetres forecast to potentially fall in some locations. Mike Lorrigan joins us now from the State Control Centre. Mike, what's the latest?
Well, this weather event is well underway already. Since 9 a.m. this morning, the SES has received more than 300 calls for assistance, mainly to do with flash flooding, but a significant amount of rainfall has already fallen, particularly on central Victoria, places like Bendigo, where homes have already been inundated and roads are being impacted. Other towns as well, like Shepparton, Kerrang, Seymour across the north of the state. We've seen rainfall of up to 50 millimetres, just under 50 millimetres across the state at the moment, but that is expected to increase over the next few hours and overnight. And right now there are already some severe weather warnings in place for watch and act alerts have been issued for Warrnambool and for Hamilton in the state's west, where severe thunderstorms are impacting those regions. And there are flood watch warnings in place for most river catchments across the north and the northeast of the state, as well as nearby Melbourne already. Isk.
So, Mike, what will happen over the next 12 to 24 hours?
Well, right now, a more volatile system is entering Victorian airspace, you could say, from the north and the northwest of the state. It's hitting around Mildura, and that system is going to bring those really severe, damaging thunderstorms, hail, and, of course, significant rain. The SES and the Bureau is expecting in some places they could receive between 100 and 200 millimetres over the coming 24 to 48 hours. And with that, we'll have a lot of ramifications in terms of flooding. I spoke with the SES just a short time ago. Take a listen.
We have got a stronger front coming through following this, which will have the storms, and that'll impact particularly through the central parts of Victoria overnight tonight and into tomorrow. That's going to be resulting in flash flooding in most areas. In the 24 hours after that, we're then expecting some riverine rises.
So most of Victoria will be in the firing line with this weather system. It is quite unpredictable. There is a lot of humidity, and they've called this as more of a tropical storm that's going to be hitting the state at the moment. The message for the community is steer clear of floodwaters, follow the warnings, and of course batten down the hatches tonight. Isk.
Mike Lorigan at the State Control Centre, thank you very much. Overseas, US authorities have grounded more than 170 Boeing planes after a horrifying accident on an Alaska Airlines jet when part of an aircraft flew off during a flight. No one was injured in the emergency landing, but the American Transportation Board says it could have been tragic if more people had been seated next to the cabin panel that blew out. There are no Boeing 737 MAX 9 aircraft flying in Australia, but other foreign airlines are inspecting their fleet.
This is why more than 170 planes have been grounded in the United States. A gaping hole in the aircraft as part of the fuselage is blown out of this Alaskan Airlines jet just after takeoff from Portland.
We need everyone to remain seated with their seat right now. Sit down.
The pilot recorded speaking to air traffic control.
Yes, we are emergency. We are depressurized. We do need to return back.
There was thankfully no one seated near the window.
Passengers were terrified.
It was a trip from hell. There was a kid in that row who his shirt was sucked off him and out of the plane, and his mother was holding on to him to make sure he didn't go with it.
I look up and the oxygen masks were hanging from the ceiling. And then I look to my left and there's this huge chunk, part of the airplane, just like missing.
The plane was forced into an emergency landing, but remarkably, all 177 people on board survived, with no major injuries reported. But it could have been deadly, and the US regulator has ordered 171 of the Boeing 737 MAX 9s to be grounded and tested before they fly again.
One of the questions here for the investigators is going to be, was that a mechanical failure or was that some failure in maintenance?
Had the aircraft been at cruising altitude, maybe more passengers would have unbuckled their belt, and then certainly there would have been a risk of loss of life with passengers potentially able to be sucked out of the aircraft.
It's a new blow for Boeing's MAX family of jets. The entire fleet was grounded in 2019 for 20 months after 2 air disasters of the MAX 8 model. In Indonesia, a Lion airplane crashed, killing 189 people. Then, an Ethiopian Airlines plane plunged into the ground minutes after takeoff. All 157 on board died. The latest incident could prove costly for Boeing, which has struggled under huge amounts of debt in recent years. Carrington Clark, ABC News, Washington.
Israel says it's destroyed a Hamas command centre in northern Gaza. Israeli Defence Forces say they're now focusing on central and southern parts of the Strip and have killed 3 Hamas militants in the city of Khan Yunis. The US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken is in Jordan meeting with Middle Eastern leaders and says he's focused on preventing the conflict in Gaza from spreading. There have been more reports of clashes at the Israeli-Lebanon border. Militant group Hezbollah has fired rockets into Israel, and the IDF says it struck a terrorist cell in retaliation. Back home, and the federal government has promised to make the NDIS more humane and less bureaucratic as part of its plans to reboot the scheme. For one family, that pledge can't come soon enough. They're upset and confused after their son was denied what they say is an essential piece of equipment. Fiona Blackwood explains.
James Gittis wears a secret weapon.
Getting tight. Put it down.
It's called a second skin, and it's custom made to provide stability for James, who has low muscle tone and hypermobility, among other conditions.
Prior to his suit, James didn't go to school full time. He was part-time just because managing his fatigue was so incredibly challenging for him.
The NDIS has funded the last 2 suits which James has grown out of. But it's rejected an application for just over $3,000 for his next suit.
So without it, he can't do judo, and judo is hands down his life.
It's a decision the family is not prepared to accept.
There's lots of calls, lots of emails. At this stage, we've actually personally committed to pay for it because we know that it's so important for James to have it. However, it shouldn't come to this.
A spokesman for the NDIA says it will work with James's family and support them to provide additional information it may need to consider their request. It comes as the federal government promises to make the NDIS less bureaucratic.
We've been advocating for people to be able to self-manage their plans a lot more and to be able to use their funding in an appropriate way to buy the essential equipment that they need.
While changes to the NDIS will take time, James is ready to tackle the challenges which come his way. Fiona Blackwood, ABC News.
Now, if you've spent your Sunday hitting the shops, you probably haven't given much thought to a time when that wasn't possible. But weekend trading is largely thanks to a hardware store owner who went to jail so that he could open up.
What time do you start this morning?
7 o'clock.
This man and this shop are etched in Australian history.
I'm not a person for backing down. I have a mind of my own.
In the 1980s, Frank Penhallirack opened his hardware store on weekends, racking up huge fines by breaking laws that restricted trading hours.
No, I won't pay a cent. Under arrest, Mr. Penhallirack. You come with me, please.
Sent to one of the nation's toughest prisons, he spent nearly 3 weeks inside.
I've proved I can stand this place for 19 days. Next time I can take it for 19 weeks, 19 months, 19 years, or 190 years.
But it didn't take that long.
Any law which comes between you as a customer and me as a shopkeeper is an ass of a law.
A changing mood and other rebel traders joining the fight forced the Victorian government to open up trading hours.
Change the damn law and open it up for everyone.
Which spread to other states and territories.
There's no doubt that Frank in the retail industry is an absolute legend.
There might be 7 days in a week, but around 1/3 of trading for discretionary items like clothing is done on the weekend. And Western Australia, South Australia and Queensland have more restrictive trading hours than other states.
Shopping is really Australia's favourite sport, so regulating trading hours in today's modern world does simply not make sense.
Now 82, Frank is preparing to sell his hardware store, reflecting on a fight that changed how we work and play.
I would like things to be different, but I wouldn't do anything different, Dan.
Daniel Ziffer, ABC News, Melbourne.
The high-pressure setting of a hospital ward can feel a million miles away from a concert hall. But a group of Australian medical professionals are bringing the two worlds together.
Playing music has been a lifelong passion for Philip Antipa. Today he's in rehearsal for an upcoming orchestral gala in Melbourne. But Philip is not only a skilled musician. He's also the head of thoracic surgery at the Royal Melbourne Hospital and Peter MacCallum Cancer Centre. 20 years ago, the surgeon founded Corpus Medicorum, an orchestra made up of health workers.
We have nurses and physiotherapists and dentists and medical scientists and PhD students.
Corpus Medicorum is one of a handful of medical orchestras around the world and is helping health workers cope with the gruelling demands of their profession.
There's no capacity to think about, oh, I wonder how the hospital's going, or I wonder how that patient's going. It's actually this set-aside period of time where I'm just in the music.
It can be quite nerve-wracking to play a solo in a concert, but at least no one's going to die if you miss a note.
Sonia Baldock played music professionally before going back to university to study intensive care nursing. She not only plays with the orchestra, but sometimes takes her violin to work.
We know that physiologically it can bring your heart rate down, so anyone who's stressed, whether that be staff, patients, family members, we know that that sense of peace comes from dropping that heart rate down.
Corpus Medicorum performs regularly in Melbourne and at venues around the world. Their performances have raised more than $1 million for lung cancer research and other projects over the past 2 decades.
When we're all in the orchestra together, we might be a bunch of medical professionals, but we're experiencing this as a bunch of music lovers.
It's intoxicating, it's addictive, it's a really an incredible thing to be part of.
Healing hearts and saving lives. Sasha Payne, ABC News, Melbourne.
A woman in her 90s has been found alive under rubble almost a week after a devastating earthquake struck Japan. It's a rare story of hope for the country. More than 120 people have been confirmed dead and 200 are still missing as the weather now makes it more difficult for rescuers.
They call it miraculous. 5 days after the earthquake hit central Japan, rescuers save a woman in her 90s. She was pulled alive from her collapsed home on the coast of Noto Peninsula. Hope has been fading for most, but there have been a number of people saved in recent days. In this one, another elderly woman is pulled to safety after a tricky operation. The workers called to her, assuring her she was now okay. Here in Wajima, the Japanese army has swung into action on the ground. These villages were cut off by landslides and their roads split after the magnitude 7.6 quake struck on New Year's Day. The area 300 kilometres northwest of Tokyo has been one of the hardest hit. 30 people were safely evacuated and more are waiting to leave. There are still around 200 people unaccounted for. This man explains the layout of his collapsed house to the search team. He believes his wife is trapped inside. Thousands of homes have been damaged or destroyed. This family is picking through the rubble for anything they can salvage. Survivors are making do, but this peninsula community also copped a 2-metre high tsunami, and elderly residents fear they'll never get back to their own homes.
We'll have to stay at a shelter with everyone else for about 3 months or more. And then for 2 or 3 years, we'll live in temporary accommodation. And I'm already over 80.
The weather isn't helping rescue and aid efforts. There's been heavy rain on and off and now hail and snow, prompting fears of further landslides, which will make it even harder to reach isolated communities. Kathleen Calderwood, ABC News, Wajima.
The people of Bangladesh are voting in an election today that's been labelled a sham. The country's main opposition has boycotted the poll after a crackdown on protesters, and some politicians have just disappeared. The government has been accused of a brutal campaign against dissenters. The Prime Minister, Sheikh Hasina, is on the brink of a 4th term in office. South Asia correspondent Meghna Bali reports from Dhaka.
Bangladesh is off to the polls, but the result seems a foregone conclusion.
Our Prime Minister will be re-elected again. Even a storm can't stop her.
There's one notable thing missing: an opposition.
This is a one-sided election. You can't clap with one hand.
A boycott of the election by the government's main opposition all but guarantees another sweep to power for Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. For decades, politics in the country has been dominated by rival dynasties, led by Prime Minister Hasina and former PM Khaleda Zia. Zia's currently on house arrest, fighting what she says are trumped-up corruption charges.
People don't accept authoritarian regimes. That's what exactly this government is.
The opposition BNP claims the government has taken control of the Electoral Commission, so it's decided to opt out. And so-called independent candidates have joined the fray.
If I win the seat, I will work for the welfare of the people.
But the opposition claims candidates like Ms Duhi are dummies intended to legitimise a one-party contest. And it doesn't help that the independent is still a local member of the ruling party.
I'm still a part of the Awami League. I'm contesting and the party doesn't have any issues.
Tensions are escalating here in the city's capital, just hours before the start of a two-day strike designed to boycott the elections. A train was set on fire here, killing 4 people. Authorities say the incident was designed to intimidate voters ahead of the election, but have stopped short of naming those responsible. Violent protests have also intensified, with almost 10,000 opposition activists arrested since late October, and some politicians going missing. But the ruling party believes the elections are free and fair.
There are no restrictions to participate in elections. There is no need to boycott or withdraw.
Despite the assurances, there are no prizes for guessing the winner of this contest. Meghna Bali, ABC News, Dhaka.
Australia's largest rail freight operator is pushing for a national summit on level crossing safety after 2 of its workers were killed in a train and truck collision near South Australia's border with New South Wales. Pacific National says urgent measures are needed to prevent more deaths at rail crossings across the country.
This New Year's Eve level crash has sparked mounting calls for improved safety at regional level crossings.
This has been an issue for a long time, and like everyone involved with this tragic accident, there's been periods of anger for myself and our team as well.
Mick Warren and Kevin Baker were killed when a truck collided with the freight train they were driving at a level crossing on the Barrier Highway. The truck driver has since been charged. Rail freight company Pacific National, where the train drivers worked, is urging federal and state governments and industry groups to hold a national supply chain forum and discuss immediate actions to prevent further fatalities. This includes awareness campaigns to improve road user behaviour around freight trains and better infrastructure. The level crossing where the accident occurred is looked after by the federal government. There are around 23,000 across Australia.
It's not going to be a single solution for every level crossing. We have to assess them, make sure that we understand the risks that are in place for every one of them and put appropriate measures in place.
The federal government says it's already taking action. Its first budget includes just over $180 million to improve level crossing safety in regional areas.
We're certainly happy to engage with operators like Pacific National and, of course, work with the Australian government. We already have a lot of work underway.
We owe it to those families, the families of Mick and Kevin, to learn as much as we can from this event.
The Australian Transport Safety Bureau is investigating the New Year's Eve crash and looking at that particular level crossing. Anisha Pilarisetti, ABC News.
Australia has its first men's player inside the world's top 10 in 17 years after Alex de Minaur fought back from a set down to defeat Alexander Zverev in the United Cup. The 24-year-old will head to Melbourne Park hoping for a deep run at his home Grand Slam.
3 straight top 10 ranked opponents, 3 straight wins for the Demon.
And there it is. De Minaur does it for Australia.
The 24-year-old dropped the first set against Germany's world number 7, Alexander Zverev, but in trademark fashion, never lost hope.
He's lifted, he's asking the crowd to lift with him.
The win propels him into the top 10 ahead of next week's Australian Open, his best result, the 4th round.
It's what I worked so hard for. It's another milestone, but it doesn't finish there. Job's not done.
His United Cup coach and mentor Leighton Hewitt was the last Aussie man to hold a place inside the world's top 10 back in July 2006.
I see all the reasons why I'm not going to be a good player, I'm not going to make it, I'm not going to improve, and I saw it in the back of my head and I used it as motivation.
In Brisbane, it was one-way traffic in the women's final.
Arena Rybakina putting on a clinic.
Arena Sabalenka had won 15 straight matches in Australia, including last year's Grand Slam title.
Well, Sabalenka had started walking to the chair. She'd given up on that point.
But it took her 9 games today to even get on the board.
Sabalenka breaks.
24-year-old Rybakina sought revenge for last year's Oz Open final loss in their head-to-head battle.
A masterclass. Elena Rybakina, the Brisbane International champion.
I really enjoy playing you, no matter the result. As I said, we always push each other, which is great, I think.
Jessica Stewart, ABC News.
And the Australian Open ball kids have gathered today at Melbourne Park as they prepare to take to the courts for qualifying and practice matches ahead of the main draw. This year's 424-strong contingent, the largest in the tournament's history, assembled for a team photo this afternoon. They were greeted by world number 11 Casper Ruud. The Norwegian had just arrived in Melbourne ahead of the Kooyong Classic, which starts on Wednesday. Luke Plapp and Roby Roseman Gannon have claimed gold in the men's and women's road races at the National Road Cycling Championships in Buninyong, just outside Ballarat. The starting line observed a moment of silence before the women's race as riders honoured two-time Olympian Melissa Hoskins, who was killed on December 30. Her husband has been charged following the incident. Roseman Gannon took out the win in a tight finish, backing up her victory in the Criterium on Friday. Loretta Hansen came in second and Alexandra Manley was third in the 104-kilometre race. Meanwhile, teammates Luke Plapp and Chris Harper sailed to the finish line together, well ahead of the rest of the field in the 185-kilometre men's race. Melbourne Victory has moved 2 points clear at the top of the A-League men's table with a dramatic 3-2 win over a 10-man Perth. Glory's Adam Taggart put the hosts in front after 20 minutes, but Victory equalised just before half-time. Glory were reduced to 10 men after the break when Bruce Kamau received a second yellow card. Substitute Ben Falami scored the decisive goal in the 96th minute to extend Victory's unbeaten run to 11 games. Back to the weather, and overnight temperatures range between 16 and 20 degrees, with the lowest of 11 felt at Falls Creek. Showers developed over central and northern Victoria this morning, which became widespread over the state during the afternoon with thunderstorms in the west. Mount William received 55 millimetres of rain. The state's high of 32 was recorded at Mildura, Bairnsdale and Orbost. In Melbourne, the temperature reached 27.2 degrees at 10 o'clock this morning. Interstate today, it was mostly cloudy in Sydney and Brisbane, wet in Hobart, hot in Perth, and Adelaide and Darwin had some showers. The satellite picture is showing mid to high level cloud over northeastern South Australia, southwest Queensland, much of New South Wales and of course much of Victoria. A trough over the west of the state contains a low pressure system which will move to the east on Monday. Heavy showers and storms over the tropical north, Queensland, central New South Wales and eastern Victoria. For the capital cities, rain will increase in Sydney, sunny in Perth, a possible shower in Adelaide, rain for Hobart and showers for Brisbane and Darwin. Back home, a cloudy day with rain, showers and thunderstorms moving across the state, but it should mostly clear in the state's west later in the day, a high of just 19 expected in Hamilton, 28 in Mildura and Swan Hill. But a different story as we move across central and northeastern Victoria, where heavy falls and severe thunderstorms are forecast. Mid to high 20s for most places. In short, it'll be warm and humid for most of places across Monday. On the bay, 15 to 20 knot southwesterly winds will tend southeasterly by the evening, waves around 1 metre. And there's a strong wind warning for central Gippsland coast and east Gippsland coast. For Melbourne, we'll have a cloudy day with rain mostly likely to the morning and afternoon, with the chance of a storm, a top of 22 down to 20 degrees tonight. And looking ahead, Tuesday partly cloudy, 25 degrees. Wednesday mostly sunny, 26. Thursday partly cloudy and 25. Friday mostly sunny and 31 degrees. Saturday a shower or two, 23. And next Sunday cloudy and 25 for day one and round one of the Australian Open. And that's it for this evening's bulletin from the news team. For the moment, good night.